I appreciate your commitment to our community, and I'm grateful that you're willing to put in the time and effort to run for office. So thank you very much. Other members of the council?
I'll just echo the comments that you made, Mayor, with regards to our staff and the community events. A great couple of weeks, obviously, with some of the celebrations which we've been able to participate in. And also a huge thank you to our volunteer boards that assist in those, our Veterans Committee as well as the Rodeo Committee. I mean, all of them were fantastic. The ceremony at the cemetery on the morning of Memorial Day was very well attended. It was a beautiful morning for it. The cemetery looked fantastic, just everything. So again, Wendy, if you'll just pass on my huge thanks to all of staff for all their hard work. This is a very, very busy time of year. Obviously, we have our Fort Harriman Days coming up shortly, which is a lot of work for our staff, but I think the engagement from our community shows how much they look forward to these types of activities. So thank you.
I'll just echo, only I just wanted to add one thing. At the rodeo, when they brought out the massive flag, how cool that was, and Memorial Day, and just standing here to say the pledge tonight, I just hope everyone hears and feels the words of the pledge. Sometimes I think we repeat it and we forget to listen to the words. One nation under God, indivisible. It's just what we pledge to, not to be divided, but indivisible. So I just listen closely when we say the words to the pledge and really understand the significance and the meaning behind that beautiful flag that we wave and we pledge to.
That massive flag was awesome. And it was also a people eater in the arena.
Yeah.
As more than one ended up underneath the flag for a few moments, but it was awesome.
Maybe next year, let's recommend not wearing sandals or flip-flops when they do that.
Yeah, going backwards. Yeah. I don't think ditto is quite satisfactory. It was amazing. Again, at least from my perspective, incredible gratitude for just everybody involved. I think a rodeo, it's just one of those few events that all the public gets to go to, and it starts with the flag, and it starts with a prayer, and I just think that is such an amazing part of our community and the heritage that we have, and I'm proud of our city for hosting that and continuing to host that, and I hope that future councils continue to support and encourage that activity in this community, because it's just a great example and a great opportunity for our community to come together. I do want to take another second and give my thanks to staff. The city and the city staff sometimes catch a lot of flack because they're unable to provide the answers that residents so much desire that they would give them. And it's sometimes difficult for them to have to deliver a disappointing message to residents of our city that's something that they feel is an injustice or something they would like to see fixed or improved in our city, and it's just they're not able to accomplish all of that sometimes, whether that's statute restrictions or budgetary restrictions or simply it's just not possible. And I appreciate that our staff will be willing to take the time to listen to and talk with and research and get information for our residents. Just the other day I was involved in a 2-hour meeting with a resident for something that dated back 20 years. And a whole series of crazy decisions and development problems and things kind of piled up on each other over years and really kind of left them as the whole of a donut that got developed all around them, right? And it created some difficulties for them. And it was through the efforts of engineering, legal, administration, everybody getting together and having a really long conversation. We didn't give them all the answers they wanted. We couldn't fix everything, but we did find a way to move forward with some ideas and improve their situation. I wish more of our residents would understand the level of commitment and energy and effort that goes into trying to find those solutions. And I'm very appreciative of staff taking the time to do that. I know that's your full-time jobs, but you also have just a few other things that are going on as well. And taking that couple extra hours to do it was really meaningful for me, to help me in addressing what a resident's concern was. So thanks to staff for doing that over and over again.
Mayor, sorry, one last one I did overlook is obviously congratulations to all of our recent graduates in our community.
Yes.
So fun.
And, you know, through the pandemic last year and the changes that affected last year's class and the city helping out and doing those graduation parades last year, they obviously did such a good job. That was part of now just another thing that we've added to the regular graduation. But that's a lot of work, obviously, for staff, for HPD in particular, and the traffic control and those things. But I heard just so many great comments from families and the students themselves about the support they get from the community and how great those activities were. So again, another big kudos to our staff, but a huge congratulations to all of our graduates.
I'll say ditto on that one. All right, we will move to the public comment portion of our meeting. Audience members may bring any item to the city council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agenda and minutes, where there is a link to fill out an online public comment form. Your statement would then be read into the record. If you would like to make a public comment at this time, please come up to the podium and state your name and begin your 2 minutes.
Good evening, Philip Taylor. I submitted it 3 times on accident, so you might have more than one comment for me. So I'd like to ask the council to address the idea of removing the restriction on selling surplus produce and eggs that are grown in a residence. So this is regards to chicken eggs. There's already enough regulations on the amount of chickens that a resident can have to prevent them from being a commercial enterprise. So it wouldn't interfere with them to be able to do that. And it would encourage self-sufficiency in the community, better health. And then the state overall is moving more and more to deregulating and encouraging citizens to grow their own food. And with the recent, with the recent problems in infrastructure in the country, we've all seen shortages, and it would be really good for our community to be able to rely on ourselves a little bit more and be able to trade and interact with each other in a way that allows us to not have to worry about food issues in the community. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Can we have a review of that
Provided to
ordinance on a
On a
next
future
work
work
meeting? I'd like to talk about that a little bit.
As long as the next work meeting, I know we've put a lot on that one, so if staff will find one in the next couple.
Appropriate.
Yes,
stuff.
thank you.
How about that?
I appreciate that. All right. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I'll turn to staff for any digital. Okay, so we appreciate that. We will go ahead and close the public comment portion of our meeting and move on. Our next item is item 8, which is City Council Board and Committee reports.
I'll start. Clint and I are on a committee, the MDA committee, just for potential annexation. We met once so far. We just barely met. The rest of the council should have received a copy of a red line MDA, very extremely preliminary MDA. Clint and I were able to give our concerns about MDAs, the ones that have burned us in the past, which is pretty much all of them, and just express some concerns and things that we want to make sure get taken care of if this moves forward. And so my report to the council would be, please look through that. We only looked through it that day ourselves, and so we haven't really had a chance to digest it either. So please look through that and start providing feedback to Clint and I so that we can take it to these meetings. Some other concerns you might have about development agreements, what should be in there, what shouldn't be in there, those types of things. Start tearing that thing apart because we need lots of eyes on that. Do you have anything else on that?
Thank you for covering that, Sherry.
Yeah, and then the Transportation Committee, Steve and I are on that. All the notes and things like that, it's mostly technical information about cross sections and things like that, where roads will be, where roads won't be, those types of things. I will ask in the Transportation Committee tomorrow. I'd like to see that picture ballooned out a lot more than I see. All I see on the screen is actually that particular development. I want to know where those roads are going to connect, how they're going to impact the rest of the community, where that traffic flow is anticipated to go, those types of things, because too often, sorry, Blake and Jonathan, I know I'm a nightmare. But too often times we see when we're making these decisions, we only see the development and we don't really see the total full impact. We see reports and things like that, but connectivity, if we're talking about doing a development in our community with connectivity, then we need to understand the connectivity, what roads are going to connect to. I understand all that specific detail is not absolutely done yet, but a lot of it is. So let's just start seeing that ballooned out picture if you could. That's kind of the transportation, the notes and things like that are on our website under, well, just right as you first log on, it has the Olympia Hills button, so click on that for residents that want to follow along with that. In addition, I was late here today, obviously, because I was at the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District Board meeting. A few different things from that. We have ordered some coloring books, some watercoloring books that will be at town days, not watercolor, but coloring books about water. That was brought up actually in the meeting of ways to try and help educate our children where water comes from, why we need to conserve, and different things like that. So I thank you to Harriman City. That was definitely highlighted in our meeting. Good job to staff for taking care of that. We are in the same situation with our tax levy. We set one today, but we still don't have the information back from the state exactly what the mill levy is going to be. So we moved forward on that. We finished up our bond. It's about it was a new money of about $45 million bond. Our bond rate for the total bond was 2.19%, so we felt like that was good, and we still maintain a bond rating of AA+. I know the mayor told me a few minutes ago that was talked about because of the governor's stuff for a future agenda to talk about things. Let me just put a bug in your ear for a couple things that should be part of that. Bluffdale just finished their, you can get conservation grants and things like that through the district. Two of their things were along Porter Rockwell, flipping their park strips. And then one of their awards was for 30,000 square feet of turf in parks that's unnecessary, that they're going to get rid of. So I would just encourage our staff to start looking at things like that. Do we have unnecessary? I know right as you come into Harriman, there's a big chunk of unnecessary sod right there on 126th on the south side of the road. Ugh. We water a lot right there. Anyway, I would just encourage staff to start maybe looking at areas like that we can say this is really unnecessary, unusable sod. And again, those are kind of things that we can look to the district for grants and things like that. Those are 80-20 grants for us, so that's a pretty good deal. And in addition to that, the governor asked that we delay or defer new landscaping to when the temperatures are cooler. So if our ordinances are requiring them to put in their landscaping and stuff, make sure that they have enough wiggle room that can be deferred until the temperatures are cool enough to put in that landscaping. It'd be better to have it dirt when it's 95 degrees out there than trying to put that in and water 3 or 4 times a day. So if we can start looking at that type of stuff to make sure that we can help with that also. The two other things that they recommended was, that and then let's just start watering 2 times a week. So people out there that are watering more than 2 times a week, the request has been to just only water 2 times a week. In addition, on slow the flow, there's some more action items. Water less. Don't water if it's windy. If it's windy, the wind is just blowing it where it's not supposed to be, and most of it's just evaporating. Water at the right time between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Not between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m.?
Water at the right time. Water between 10 a.m. Don't between 10 a.m. and 6 a.m. Sorry. Yeah, don't water in the day. Prioritize your watering: trees, shrubs, perennials, annuals, and grass, kind of in that order. So water your trees and then kind of go down the list that way. Raise your mower. Set your blades at 3 or 4 inches so your grass is taller. It promotes deeper roots, and it doesn't dry out as fast because it kind of shades itself. Get rebates. There's rebates available for old toilets and water smarts, irrigation controllers. And these are all available at slowtheflow.org. Check your local provider to see there are different areas, obviously, throughout the whole state, and different areas have certain water restrictions, so make sure you understand what your water restrictions are. So those are just some of the ideas.
Cool to have a brown lawn this year, guys.
It is. It's fine to have a brown lawn. It will come back. Obviously, I don't have to tell anybody that I've said this 800 meetings in a row about the water shortages that we're in, and just double droughts in a row, 2 years in a row. We actually have been doing a little bit better this year. If you compare to last year at the same month, there is a little bit less water usage, which is good because it was hot and dry last year too. So we're seeing that maybe there might be a little bit of habit changes that are kind of helping towards that. So keep up the good work. Keep trying just to reduce and just to be water wise, and just these little things go a really long ways towards helping make sure that we have enough water for the things that we need water for. We just approved this, just for the council's understanding or whoever else. We just approved a CDA for Midvale City on their commercial redevelopment area there. So that's at a 40%. We keep 40%, and we pass along 60 of the TIF money. So just so you know, those are still happening, and so those are still available. And that's kind of all.
I'll just piggyback in here. From Association of Municipal Councils, we had a report from Chazelle Terry from the Water Conservancy Board, and the data she was showing about the severity of the drought was a little bit startling. You hear that it's a serious drought. You're hearing, don't water, and people are kind of removed from the sources of data to understand why these things are being asked for. They rank, if you would imagine, a 99th percentile year in terms of precipitation would be floods. A 1% percentile year would be the most extreme drought we've ever had. We're somewhere between 2 and 4 percentile in the areas that supply water to the Salt Lake Valley right now. We are it's a little hard to tell because it's early in the year. This will either be first, second, or third driest year in the history of Utah. So it's bad. I don't think severe drought really defines it enough. It's just an extreme drought conditions that we're in. The good news is that our reservoirs are still relatively okay. They're down from where they were last year substantially, but they're not, drained yet. Our responsibility then is to try and use what's there less, so that next year, if the drought continues as is predicted, there will still be water for key things next year. Like Sherry said, she said it just a little differently. If everybody would just water one less time per week, even if you're not sure everything, just turn your sprinkler system off for a day and then let it run its normal cycle, right? Just one less time per week would be very helpful for everybody. There are, for those people that are looking at putting in landscaping or changing landscaping, the Water Conservancy Board has free landscaping consultations for people to understand how to be water wise. You can go to their website, sign up for those, and they have landscaping professionals will come out and talk to you about how to set up and design your yard. So
Yeah, you can Google localscapes.
yeah, it's very cool that they'll do that. And they also have those consultations for not only residential, but for businesses as well. So if businesses want to know how to better use the landscape around their area and stuff like that, they can also get these consultations. One of the things that came up was there's a discussion about what percentage of water in the state is used for agricultural purposes versus residential purposes. And there was this idea that because such a large percentage is used for agricultural purposes, that our conservation efforts as residential users doesn't really make that much of a percentage difference overall. But it makes a huge difference because of sources of water. I didn't understand this, and she only hinted at the explanation, but the water that we get that comes from the cleanest water sources is the cheapest to treat and to provide us. So we need to conserve the cleanest water sources so that we can preserve our lower water rates and availability. When water has to come from other sources that are less clean, you know, Utah Lake, it's a lot more expensive and effort to clean that water and treat it so that it can be delivered into our culinary water supply. So it does make a huge difference. Even though the percentages aren't great, the financial impact on all of us as residents and the state is tremendous. So I just wanted to echo what you were saying. Save water, guys, please, everything you can do.
Let me just tag on the agricultural thing. Currently, the ratio is about 80-20. 80% goes to ag and about 20% goes to culinary. That's of diverted water. But we always need to remember that ag makes 100% of our food. So even though, and they only get 80% of the water. So please always remember that. Sometimes that's skipped over and frowned upon, but it's critically important, not to mention that ag water replenishes aquifers. Culinary water currently does not. So they're pumping a huge chunk of that 80% right back into the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
In relation, before you move off that topic, as we have that discussion, something that I thought about, I'd just like staff to look into the code enforcement on lawns and seeing if we require, if there's like an appearance thing, something that our code enforcement, other than just weeds getting too tall, if we need to temporarily suspend that to ensure that nobody has a question that we're not going to enforce them letting their lawn go brown.
There's also an area of that I wanted to get to, and that is one of the things that's a big waster of water are broken sprinklers. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that as a city that we're doing a good job of trying to identify those and repair those quickly. We get, anecdotal reports of a sprinkler head that's shooting water up and it's been running for, 4 days and nobody's fixed it. So we want to get to those quickly and be a good example. There's a question that I'm just going to ask, and we probably can't address this here, but it would be good for a future conversation is, I think there's a lot of people that don't know how to fix their sprinklers if they are broken. They either don't have the expertise or the tools to repair their own sprinklers that are broken. I wonder what assistance or education that we might be able to organize as a community to help support those that have some problems there. I didn't know anything about sprinkler systems until I had to put my own in, right? And you have to go and talk to the sprinkler guys and tell you how to do it, and you break it and you fix it and you cut it and splice it and you get purple stuff all over your hands. It's great. So having done that a bunch of time, I feel confident I can go fix my own sprinklers. But I don't know that all the residents of Harriman have that same experience or knowledge. So I'd like to have a conversation about what we can do to help people fix those problems, because it's just wasting water. And if somebody knows what to do and go over and repair a sprinkler head for $11, let's see if we can figure out how to do that. So anyway, that's it.
I'll run through mine fairly quickly. Just a thought on the water conservation. Obviously, we all have to do our part. Sherry made me think of something when she talked about just the times to water our lawns, don't water in the wind. If you haven't invested in a Wi-Fi sprinkler timer, go do it. One of the best investments I ever made, there's usually rebates associated with those.
It's $75 right now.
Yeah, there's usually rebates. They will automatically put your timer in a delay if there is wind or if there is rain in the forecast, which is something, again, that makes it much easier to help conserve that water, because if we're not thinking about it, at least we have a device that will do it for us. And then when it comes time in the springtime to actually fire up your system, you will thank yourself for buying that, as you're able to walk around and turn on those zones from your phone instead of having to run back and forth 167 times to your garage where your timer usually is. It is worth that, just the investment for that alone. So, but there's great things out there, again, like that will help us conserve our water. Very quickly, we held our UTA Local Advisory Council meeting last week. A couple of items to note coming out of that. They did update and approve moving forward the Point of the Mountain Transit Study locally preferred alternative. That is on their site that you can view that. But basically what this does is this is a BRT bus route system that will go from the current location of the Front Runner Station there in Draper on eBay Way, and have connectivity through the new prison site, or what will be developed out as the prison site, a dedicated bridge that will go up and over I-15 to the east side, and then down the east side of I-15 with stops in there down into Lehigh, finishing off down at the Lehigh track station. So that right now, again, a BRT or a bus rapid transit route is the preferred route. The implementation of that route is about half the cost of putting in a light rail extension or contingency of that. So that is, and sometimes a little more flexibility in terms of the apparatus, the buses versus the trains running on the tracks and those things. But that is what is moving forward at this time for that funding. We did a updated approval to the station area plan for the Ogden TOD development. Again, these are transit-oriented development is what TOD stands for. This is encouragement of really higher density development, those types of things around the transit stations, again, to give people the opportunity really to use transit as their primary means of transportation. And UTA does own, a fair amount of property along the rail system, primarily Front Runner, and is investing in these transit-oriented developments, teaming up with the communities where they exist to help utilize, again, the right type of development around the transit options that are available. And I always put in a plug that we would love to do a TOD development, but that would mean we'd have to have a good transportation option in our community in order to engage in that conversation. So they do change, what they refer to as change day twice a year within UTA system, where they make changes to bus routes and tracks timing and all of those types of things. They have an August change day. As part of the change day that's most significant to Harriman is we've had the VIA program that's been a pilot program out here, started before the pandemic hit. So it kind of certainly decreased the success of that program that we were seeing up until the beginning of the pandemic. However, that being said, the VIA program will go from a pilot program to a permanent program within our area. So those that are using VIA, this is essentially a Uber-like service that's offered via UTA. You can order through an app, pay through the app, all of those things, and it's very effective as a first and last mile component and tie into our transit system. And a lot of the data that shows that obviously the people that are using it is a connection point to either Front Runner or to our track stations in South Jordan, our closest one, and in Draper, in terms of using that service. But that will become a permanent service. And now they are looking at other areas that they can implement that same VIA program along the transit system. So good news there. The last thing from UTA is that our executive director that has been there for a little bit over a year, Carolyn Gano, is leaving. She's actually going back to the agency that she came from as the executive director now of that system. So she's headed back to California. So there will be a interim director appointed once she leaves at the 1st of July. And then obviously they're gearing up to begin the search for a replacement right now. So that is a report from UTA. Just by way, the mayor mentioned, obviously, upcoming elections. The sewer board, which I sit on, the composition of that board has, currently it's been a 7-member board with 4 of the members that are appointed by cities to represent the cities, on the Harriman being one, but there was 3 elected positions from the at-large areas of the sewer district. We have made a change. We had a resignation as from one of those board positions earlier this year. So currently we are operating at a 6-member board, but by state statute that board has to be an odd number. We can't operate at 6 because of the resignation, but we've opted not to fill that opening because as a board we've made the decision that we will drop to a 5-member board with these elections coming up, which means there is 1 position that will be open for election going into it, and we have 2 applicants that have put in for that 1 position. And again, those applicants have to come from the areas that the sewer board represents that are not wholly within the sewer district. Again, Harriman, that primarily encompasses Draper, a small piece of Sandy, and Copperton. Those are the areas that those elected positions would have to come from. So there will be an election for the 1 open position, and following the election cycle, and then at the start of next year, we will have 5 members that represent the sewer board. And then lastly, I'll just, there was some talk about Sherry did a great job of updating some of the boards that we're sitting on internally as they deal with annexation. Just a plug, I think our staff does a fantastic job of pushing information out as it relates to that, all of the documents that are found on the website. But another avenue that Councilman Shields and myself were able to participate in last week was the making of a podcast. It's riveting, and
It's hot.
the room was hot. But Haremanology is what it's been, named. But a lot of very informative topics that are covered through those podcasts, and in particularly, Councilman Shields and myself were able to talk about annexation in particular last week. So again, just another avenue for the residents to go and listening to something else that will help educate them on the annexation process and some of the things that have to be considered in that. But I really appreciate staff. I had fun making the podcast. It was a good discussion. That's all I've got.
If I could just circle back. So Sherry and I serve on the Infrastructure Transportation Working Group, which she reported on. Jared and I work on the Finance Working Group. And there was a really interesting conversation that happened in our last meeting in references to means and methods for financing and paying for municipal infrastructure construction. And all of these various mechanisms and impact fees and special assessment areas and even PIDs, right? I mean, these are all tools that people use for financing infrastructure. And there was another way discussed that would be different and unique to our city, and that could be the idea of a contract fee as opposed to impact fee. It would essentially be about 6s, right? The contract fee wouldn't be substantially different as far as how it's calculated. But it could allow for more frequent adjustments based on cost of infrastructure. It could allow for other things that aren't normally included in impact fees to be paid for through those contract fees as well. So there's some considerations about that. The reason I bring this up is each particular method of financing municipal infrastructure has its pluses and minuses. There's advantages that could be more flexible or less flexible. They could be larger amounts of money or lesser amounts of money. They could be more immediate money or delayed money. And one of the questions that I really didn't have an answer to was, as a community, what is our hierarchy of priorities in relation to how we get that money? Is it more important for us to get more of that money now, or to have the lowest possible fees on new homes to make them more affordable, right? Or the argument that they're more affordable. Do we want certain infrastructure projects to be prioritized in the city, in the new development, how those, connectivity of all those roads? I think it's just important for us as a council to start considering what is our ultimate goals with new development, with annexations, with new development agreements in regards to how we finance infrastructure, and determine what those priorities might be, so it will better help us determine what lever we might want to pull, if that makes sense. So, sorry that's a very kind of theoretical report instead of a definitive report, but it was just a really interesting discussion around, I don't know which is the right way to go. So it's going to be great to get public input on that, but as a council, it's something we need to start asking about.
One of the interesting, piggybacking on that, Steve, one of the interesting, I guess, aspects of potentially or considering a contract fee rather than an impact fee is that it lessens significantly the restrictions on that money and how it's spent and when it's spent.
And how the city can spend it.
And how the city can spend it, which, again, to your point, the timing of that, the projects that we need, where we can potentially use that money, that all needs to be part of that conversation. But
Yeah,
very good.
I think it's important too that one of the things that we've talked about with impact fees is there's timing requirements on those fees that they're collected. They have to be spent in a certain amount of time. So sometimes the fees are collected in a specific project area, but because the aspects that would be paid for with those impact fees don't happen for 8 or 10 or 12 years down the road, those fees had to be paid to another project in the city. And so there's this, shuffling of funds from this to that, to this to that. Councilman Henderson describes it as a Ponzi scheme. I don't know that that's necessarily an accurate description, but there's a lot of changing of timing and priorities of things that go around. One of the things that was discussed in the Finance Committee was the idea of what could be done contractually to keep the fees that are collected in a potential annexation area like Olympia Hills in Olympia Hills and impact related to Olympia Hills, so that those fees wouldn't be used for other projects in the city, if that makes sense. Yep. So that it doesn't become an avenue to try and economically solve another problem in the community, but it becomes a mechanism to address the future concerns of new development. Does that make sense? Yep. So again, I just want the public to understand all of these conversations, all these work groups really, really, really are important to making sure that if and when decisions are made about annexation or new zones or anything that's going on, that we're really digging into some of this minutia, because it really does matter.
And just so that members of the public and those who might be here are aware, we do have this on our work agenda as a standing item that we will do more in-depth reviews of what happened in those meetings. So item 4.1 under our work meeting is working group updates. For example, in regards to the design guidelines, Councilman Smith and myself had a meeting, and then we had some feedback that we'd like to take back to the council to get discussion and to see what their input is as we have that. So those you'll be seeing in the work meeting. We'll go back into that work meeting after we're done here, and the public is more than welcome to participate in that entire process, so you can hear the discussions that we're having as well. And once again, we want this to be a robust process that is clear as to what's going on and what we're discussing and going on. So, Jared, I don't want to skip you. Do you have anything you need to report on today?
I'll just touch on a couple things real quick. Unified Fire Authority board meetings next week. I'm sure that drought and fire conditions are going to be a big topic there as well. Regarding water, in every meeting I have attended, every analysis done shows that people use more water per acre than agriculture. And as Sherry mentioned, agricultural replenishes the aquifers versus having it run down the storm drain to the river, right? So we got people use way more water than ag. What we do every day with it really does make a difference. And then the Ponzi schemes, thanks, Steve. Really, in my line of work, right? Invest, planning, etc. We go through these things all the time, looking at case studies and regulations, etc. And the reason I use that as a descriptor for some of these things in government is that if you can only continue doing something by bringing in new money, if the new money stops and you go belly up, that's pretty much what a Ponzi scheme is, which is why I use that description, right? If whether it's impact fees or a municipal budget or whatever it is, if the only way to keep going is to get new people in to pay the old people off, that's not a sustainable model. So hopefully we're working on some of those things, and as Steve described, the different options that we might have to fund some of this. Be interesting to see how we can affect this going forward.
Thank you. All right. If there's no further reports, we will go ahead and move on to our consent agenda. I will accept a motion.
Mayor, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Jared?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
I vote yes, that motion passes. I just would like to say congratulations to our engineering department for finally getting those engineering standards done. Good job. I know I've been hounding you for years, and I'm very appreciative of all the effort that you went into doing that, so thank you very much. We will move on to item 10.1, which is discussion and consideration of a resolution amending the fiscal year 2020-2021 Harriman City budget. Alan?
Talked about in the earlier meeting, what you're being asked to approve today is strictly the revised 2021 budget. This is the budget that lasts for the next 3 weeks, okay? And then in large part, this budget is being reduced because of things that have happened over the last several months. So, but what we're looking at approval right now is approval of the remainder of this year. So we'll be looking at approval of the 2022 proposed budget as we get through our tax truth and taxation hearing the first part of August. So we'll complete that budget at that time. So.
Any questions by this council? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Motion to approve resolution R08-2021, approving an amendment to the fiscal year 2020-2021 Harriman City budget.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry? Yes. Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I vote yes, that motion passes. We will move on to item 10.2, discussion and consideration of a resolution creating the Harriman City Fire Service Area. Chase?
Thank you. So this is the final step, the final legislative step in creating a fire service district that has been discussed by the council. And just maybe to provide a little context, a little background for that, at the end of the 2020 calendar year, Harriman City withdrew from the Unified Fire Service Area, which was the taxing entity that collected the property taxes from the residents of Harriman to pay for fire services that we contract with UFA for. The Harriman City Council decided to withdraw from that taxing entity and to create its own, which this proposed resolution would do. There are a few more administrative steps that we'll carry out that involve the Lieutenant Governor's office, but this would essentially authorize the creation of that from the Harriman City Council. We've gone through the other statutory steps to have a public hearing on this matter. We've also gone through a statutory protest period. And again, this would just be that final step by the council to authorize the creation of the Harriman City Fire Service Area to levy property tax to pay for fire services.
So just mostly for information to our residents, the creation of this district, what this will allow us to do is for the district to collect taxes as opposed to sending those taxes into the general fund to ensure that these are designated specifically for fire service and not used for any other projects or services the city might choose to provide.
Correct.
And why we would love to do that this year, dates and timelines didn't work out, so it will go into the general budget this year, but the intent of this body is next year, or the following year, is that we will have that go straight into the fire service district.
Correct, and Alan explained that process in the previous meeting when he showed how the money would come in through the city's property tax.
I'm just looking forward to truth and taxation.
And
That's what this is all about.
And an additional point that Alan and I had talked about was, obviously, this is a separate district that works independent of the city. It pays for the fire services that the residents pay through their property taxes. But that property tax can only be levied to a certain point, right? There are certain restrictions on local districts and service districts set by statute that allow for the local district board, which will be you, to levy only up to a certain amount. As property taxes increase, as Alan explained, that rate goes down to account for the revenue that's needed, not the tax rate that's needed. Given that scenario, there is a hypothetical where property values plummet such that the tax rate needs to be increased in order to maintain that revenue. But given the statutory limits of a district, they can only raise the property taxes to a certain mill levy, is what it's referred to as. So there is a hypothetical situation where, under a district scenario that we're talking about, that we're creating, that could be a case where the property values are such that the mill rate can only be increased to a certain amount, and then there's a deficiency. There are ways to alleviate that. One would be to raise the city's property tax to make up the difference. The city can pump additional money into those public services by raising their property tax. Another option would be to have the district in existence until that point and then make a determination based upon the needs of the city whether to just roll that into the city's property tax, right? Or, and this is the alternatives in my staff report, you just do nothing and keep it under the city's property tax inevitably after it's raised through this truth and taxation process. Again, as the mayor pointed out, there's still value in having that. It is separate from the city's general fund.
But there may come a time where we have to revisit it.
And Alan would never let this happen, but if a city goes bankrupt, the district still collects property tax and is still funding those services.
Those essential services.
Which means you still get your fire, you still get your police service.
Those are still funded regardless of how the city operates its budget. And again, Alan, I did say that would never happen under your watchful eye.
So thank you, Chase, we appreciate that. Did you have anything additional?
No, unless you have any questions for me.
Are there any questions or discussion?
No, just a comment about the last point that Chase made. And I think for clarity and what this council has voiced is a desire to really make sure that our residents understand what their taxes are being collected for and what they're being spent on, so that they don't, we do our best to try and eliminate any confusion or misunderstanding there. In discussing and checking this with a number of other cities, there are very few cities that have service areas set up for their public safety stuff. Usually that comes into the general fund and paid out of the general fund. Of course, it's a separate line item so people can see it, but they don't necessarily understand what percentage of their property taxes are being spent for that. They just see one big property tax for the city. So that being said, I think in an ideal world, we can keep the service areas and they work and that's great. But I foresee that there could be a chance where that will no longer function the way that it was intended, and future councils are going to have a decision to make about how to still be transparent, but make sure that the funding happens. So I'm in supportive of the motion and the resolution, but I just echo that concern. I would hate for us to set something up and then in 18 months find out, there's a massive crash, the property values go down, and the first year it doesn't work, so.
I will add to that point, Councilmember Shields, is we saw obviously property values plummet in 2008, 2009, 2010. And even in those years, the service districts that were created for this purpose didn't have to go beyond that rate. But what you did see was property taxes not being paid. So cities and districts were not actually collecting the property tax to be adequately funded. It wasn't an issue so much of the property tax being high enough. It was, they just weren't being funded. And obviously those get paid, right? Property taxes always get paid eventually as tax liens are authorized and as properties are sold. But that's the major concern, right? And we've seen that in recent history as well.
Yep.
But creating a service district doesn't address that. It's just they just
Neither
pay
option.
taxes.
Neither does.
Yeah, neither option does.
Neither does.
That's
Exactly.
true.
But I do foresee a time where it would be more likely that the city property tax rate would change to support the service areas is probably the most likely scenario. Right.
So on this particular item, just because I love our public service and public safety things so much, I'm going to request a moment of personal privilege to actually make the motion on this item, which I believe is appropriate as I am a member of this body. I normally do not, but I would like to make the motion on this one, that we approve resolution R14-2021, approving the creation of the Harriman City Fire Service Area to fund first responder services within Harriman City.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. Steve?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I would vote yes, that motion passes. We will move on to item 10.3, discussion and consideration of an ordinance adopting dog park rules and regulations. Anthony.
Good evening. So we met 2 weeks ago in the work meeting and discussed these rules and regulations a little bit based on the feedback we received there. I've brought to you some of the changes that we made to these rules and regulations. So we'll just jump right into it. The first one is we added the verbiage "at one time" at the end of the first rule there. Each park user may bring no more than 3 dogs into the park at one time. So that was the first change we made. Revision number 2, we did reword this a little bit. We've changed the verbiage to say park users are required to quiet or otherwise remove from the park their dogs that excessively or unreasonably bark. And then we did remove a portion, the latter portion that talks about the violation and how it would be handled under a city code, because there is verbiage later on in the rules and regulations that already address this. So we removed that portion as well. Revision number 3 we made was we just removed section E, which states that the city may close a park for regularly scheduled maintenance. That's already included in our regular parks ordinance, so no need to have that in there. Final revision was the sale and transfer of ownership or exchange of animals at the dog park is prohibited. So we added that verbiage in there as well.
And that, in the opinion of our attorney, would include the parking lot? Thank
That's
you.
included in the park area.
Okay,
Yes.
correct, thank you.
Do we need to express that in the rules because,
Because people are gonna try to argue.
yeah,
that
people are
that's
gonna
not-
say I wasn't in the park, I was in the parking lot. That's the only suggestion I had, is that we add, including the parking lot.
Yeah, we can do that.
Do that?
It's a
Okay.
minor change, yeah.
Include that, okay. So those are the,
In our motion.
Yes,
okay.
yeah, and I'll make the change in the language.
okay. Those are the 4 revisions that we had on those rules and regulations, unless there's any other discussion or any additions or
I just have a
changes.
quick question
Sure.
for Chase. Can you go back to the one about bark? Unreasonable bark, this is another situation where I can see a resident or a user arguing that my dog is not barking, my dog is growling. Do we need to specify that it's noise of any kind, or is bark sufficient for our for our enforcement officers to address that?
Yeah, I think bark's sufficient. I mean, it's kind of a term of art, right, that is understandable with regard to dogs. I'm creating a scenario in my mind where I would have to defend that or actually prosecute that, and I don't think that would be an issue of proving whether or not a dog was
My dog
barking
didn't
or
bark, they were
growling.
yelping.
right.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is,
Correct.
is I will not be, I would be shocked if somebody didn't make that claim of he's not barking, he's yelping, or he's whatever. If bark is sufficient, if in your opinion bark is sufficient, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, from a prosecution standpoint, I wouldn't have an issue with that.
All right, fine. Thank you very much for that feedback. Any other further discussion?
Good job, Anthony.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'd be happy to accept a motion on this item.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2021-13, approving an amendment to Title 7 of the Harriman City Code and adopting Chapter 8, Section 14 regarding rules and regulations for dog parks, including the
Language that
language
includes the
that
parking
includes
lot.
parking lots adjusted by Chase.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Clint,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. That brings us to the end of our general meeting. Our next Planning Commission meeting is June 17th at 7 PM. Our next City Council meeting is I don't have it on here, the 20. July 14th, so we do not have another meeting in June.
Not regularly scheduled.
We do not have another regularly scheduled meeting.
Schedule one on you.
Depending on the tax, or the budget situation.
Oh, there is a joint meeting on the 30th.
Okay, so there is a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council on the 30th of June. The next regularly scheduled is July 14th for the City Council meeting. However, if the need arises, which is a possibility, we may hold an additional special meeting for the City Council to address any taxation issues or anything, other things that need to come up to make sure that we are in line with state statute. So just so the residents are aware. The other thing that I'm really looking forward to is June 21st through the 26th is Harem Town Days. They are back. I'm super excited about it, and I am looking forward to seeing all the effort that our staff has put in to once again make sure that we are doing the things that make us feel like a community. So I'm looking very much forward to that.
Mr. Mayor, also, just for the council's information, on June the 24th, we are hosting a Conference of Mayors here at City Hall at 11:30. We are providing lunch. We'll do a little spotlight on the city. I would invite all members of the council, if they're available, to attend that meeting. I think it's a great opportunity for everyone to be here and represent our city as we do a little bit of a spotlight on it. But again, that's the 24th at 11:30.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilman Smith. If there are no further announcements, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn our meeting and reconvene in our work meeting after a short break.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. For those of you who are here present or online, we will be going back into the workroom. Please feel free to continue to join us. We're going to have a fun discussion about all sorts of stuff.